Reddit was asked, what's the weirdest thing you've seen at a friend's house that they thought was normal? Here are the best ones. Story 1. This one still gives me chills thinking about it. When I was in first grade, I had a best friend who used to get really bad temper tantrums. One night I was sleeping over at her house, and I fell asleep in her bedroom like normal. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. And I wasn't in her room anymore. I was in a different bed. And her dad was in the bed with me. I was completely confused. He explained that my friend had thrown a tantrum, so her mom had gone to sleep in her room to calm her down, and they'd moved me to the guest room. Which, okay. But why was he also in the guest room? In the same bed as me? A child he barely knew. I was too young to understand why that was wrong. I just thought it was a bit strange and went back to sleep. But the next day when I got home and told my parents what happened, they went white. They immediately started asking if he had touched me, if anything had happened, why he was in the same bed as me, and I genuinely didn't understand why they were so upset. Now that I'm an adult, I think about it differently. Nothing happened. They really were good people. But the decision-making there, why didn't they just put me in the guest room alone? Why did the dad need to be in there? It's one of those things that gets weirder the older you get. Story 2. This is an I was that family story. And I didn't realize it until I was in my 30s. My godmother was practically an aunt to me. She ran a successful home daycare in the 90s, first-generation immigrant, lovely woman. My 2 younger brothers and I spent loads of time at her house when we were kids. I was usually the oldest child there. When I was around 8 years old, she started asking me to make her drinks. Gin and tonic. Her favorite. And I didn't think anything of it because she asked so nicely and it made her happy. But here's the thing, she wasn't having the occasional gin and tonic. She was drinking them all day. Every day. While running a home daycare full of young children. By the time I was 8 years old I knew how to mix cocktails. I knew that forks stirred better than spoons. I knew that the big plastic bottles of gin were cheap and low quality because of how they tasted when I accidentally licked a drop off my finger once. That single taste of bargain gin put me off the stuff until I was 30 years old. This went on for years until my family moved away. My godmother kept running the daycare until she passed away when I was 15. Almost certainly alcohol-related health problems. And I spent most of my life thinking absolutely nothing of it. Just, a funny memory. Something a bit quirky about her. And then I became a father. And suddenly all I could think was, how did anyone let this woman run a daycare? Story 3. I went to a sleepover at a friend's house when I was a kid, and her mom was obsessively taking photos of us all night. Not just the odd snap here and there. Constantly. Every few minutes, another photo. It felt a bit odd but we were kids and we just got on with it. At one point my friend fell asleep on the sofa while we were watching a film. And her mom pulled out this huge, heavy-duty professional camera. Like a proper newscast camera. And stood there recording her daughter sleeping for a solid 5 minutes. Just, filming her. Sleeping. Later that night, when we'd all gone to bed, I was lying on the floor facing the wall. I have trouble sleeping so I was just staring into the dark. And then I heard the door creak. Footsteps. And then the whole room lit up with a camera flash. By the time I turned around, the door was already closing. It was 3 in the morning. Which means this woman either set an alarm specifically to come in and photograph us sleeping, or she had just stayed up all night waiting for the right moment. I never went back for another sleepover. Story 4. I was in 6th grade when I went for a sleepover at a friend's house. We showed up straight after school, around 3 in the afternoon. Walked through the front door and immediately stopped. Her mom was on the floor. Half-dressed. Passed out drunk. Her head was resting on the floor, one arm twisted up somehow so it was resting on the coffee table, and her legs were draped across the sofa. The TV was on full blast. She didn't even stir when we walked in. Now, I had absolutely no experience with anything like this at that age. I could tell my friend was embarrassed, but I didn't really understand why. In my head I genuinely just thought her mom had chosen a slightly odd place for a nap. That was it. That was my entire interpretation of the situation. I actually went home and mentioned it to my parents. Told them it was a bit strange that she'd been napping on the floor instead of in bed. And I remember genuinely asking whether they'd ever let me sleep on the sofa and watch TV like that. My parents immediately understood exactly what had happened. But they were subtle about it, bless them. They never made a scene, never said anything that would embarrass my friend, never brought it up again. What they did do, quietly and without ever explaining why, was make sure every single sleepover from that point on happened at our house instead. I didn't even notice the change for a couple of years. But looking back, I think my friend noticed. And I think she appreciated it more than I'll ever know. We're still friends to this day. She's a doctor now, has kids of her own, and she's doing brilliantly. Her mom unfortunately still struggles with the same things. Some things don't change. Story 5. This one isn't weird in a dark way. It's weird in the best possible way. But it genuinely changed how I saw the world. I spent Christmas with my girlfriend's family when I was in secondary school. Her mom was opening presents, one from each daughter, then finally one from her husband. Normal enough so far. But then her husband started pulling out more gifts. Hidden ones. Earrings from inside the sofa cushions. A necklace from behind the curtains. Bracelets. A bag of sweets. Flowers. He'd hidden presents all over the living room, behind the TV, inside a lampshade, at the back of a cupboard. At least a dozen of them. And he just kept going, with this massive grin on his face, watching his wife's reaction to every single one. When he was finally done, he wished her a Merry Christmas, told her he loved her, and kissed her. And I remember standing there thinking, this is wonderful. But also deeply strange. Why does this feel strange? It took me a moment to figure it out. I had never once in my entire life seen my own parents show each other any affection. Not a kiss. Not a hug. I had never heard either of them say I love you to the other. Not once. And I had grown up thinking that was just normal. That was just how adults were. Standing in that living room watching this man beam at his wife, I realized for the first time that my family was the weird one. I've never forgotten it. Those people became role models to me in a way they'll never know. I still hope they're doing well. Story 6. Does the most horrifically filthy place you've ever seen count as weird? Because I've got one. I'd known this guy since middle school. Lost touch after we graduated, then reconnected about 6 years later. He'd moved in with a partner, they had a young child, all living together in a small 2-bedroom place. I went round to visit. The smell hit me before I even got through the door. The carpet had once been some kind of shag pile. Now it was just, matted down into something I couldn't identify. Every surface in the living room was covered in dishes, glasses, boxes, random objects. All of it, every single bit of it, was coated in thick green mold. The kitchen had a bedsheet hanging over the doorway instead of a door. I looked in for approximately 4 seconds. The sink had standing water in it with a solid blanket of mold growing across the top. I did not look any further. Then I made the mistake of asking to use the bathroom. The sink, the bath, and the toilet were all black. The gap between them was stuffed with what I think had once been towels, but they'd been sitting there long enough that they'd rotted down into a single solid lump of slime and smell. I did not use the bathroom. The child's room was almost completely bare. A mattress on the floor with a single sheet and blanket. The hallway outside had a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, swarming with bugs. Child Protective Services were called. I don't know what happened after that. I never went back. Story 7. This one is less weird and more just, genuinely sad. And a little bit infuriating. When I was young, my dad passed away. My mum remarried, had 2 more kids, and I was moved into the basement. An unfinished basement. Bare concrete walls, wood beams across the ceiling, cement floors. Cold and humid. I had a sheet hanging up to separate my sleeping area from the laundry. I used a heater and a dehumidifier just to make it livable. I was 10 years old and I genuinely thought nothing of it. It was just my room. My friends weren't allowed over. My brother and sister weren't allowed in my room. When distant family visited, I was told to use the guest room instead so nobody would see where I actually slept. I thought that was fine. I thought I had a massive room that I didn't have to share with anyone. Every year from when I was 12 until I was 18, my family went on holiday without me. I was left behind to watch the house and look after the dog. And I thought, cool. I get the house to myself. It wasn't until I was 17 that a friend came over while they were away and actually said it out loud. He pointed out that my brother and sister had proper furnished bedrooms with TVs. That there was a fully furnished guest room. And that I was living in a cold basement with sheets for walls and bathroom mats on the floor. I completely dismissed it. It was normal to me. I'd never known anything different. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out the family holidays, the ones I was never taken on, were paid for using money from my dad's estate. Money that was supposed to be for me. My brother and sister have no memory of any of it. When I bring it up, they tell me I'm remembering it wrong. That we were raised right. That I chose not to go on the trips. They also thought the guest room was my bedroom. They never even knew I existed down there. Drop your own story in the comments. What's the weirdest thing you ever saw at a friend's house? And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories every week.